So welcome to Introductory Excel Skills to Sharpen Your Data Toolkit. Before we go too far, we do have interpretation available in Spanish. And so we wanted to pause if you're in the regular, you just joined regular channel so that you can navigate to the globe for interpretation and select English or Spanish. And then I'm going to pause, and I believe we have Norma, who's also going to repeat what I said so that if you are looking for the Spanish option, you can find it. So really glad to have so many folks here today. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be in this Excel skills workshop with us. If we haven't met you before, we're very excited to meet you today. We're Cardea. This workshop's primarily going to be facilitated by myself and Olivia, and this is just a little bit about Cardea if you don't know us. By the end, we hope that you'll feel like you know a little bit more about ways to navigate an Excel spreadsheet, know some ways to format cells, and learn ways to start using those tools to clean data in Excel and learn how to create some simple formulas. So this is very much an introductory workshop. If you're hoping for things like pivot tables or maybe some advanced formulas, we really encourage you to think about joining our intermediate workshop. We won't be covering those pivot tables and things like that today. And if we get into things and you feel like you would prefer to hop off and join us for intermediate, we certainly welcome you to make that choice today. So what we're going to spend our time doing over the next 2 hours is welcome you here, and then we're going to go through kind of like some main chunks here, which are doing Excel navigation and formatting, and we'll do demonstrations that you can follow along and practice along the way. And then we'll do some preparing and cleaning data, and we'll do another demonstration that you can follow along with. And then we'll do some very simple analysis overview. And again, we'll pause and do a demo, and then we'll spend time together in breakout groups, kind of going through and practicing some different things together. It'd be a great space to ask any specific questions that you might have. We also welcome your questions in chat, and we'll do our best to pause and make sure we're answering those questions. And then anything you feel you didn't get answered, we'll have time in those breakout groups to make sure that we're walking through anything you want to see again. And then we'll wrap up, and we have a little survey because we do this workshop multiple times, and we do try to incorporate your feedback. So before we get into the Excel skills, we like to just pause and take a moment and come into the workshop space. These are some statements that we like to use. We just kind of suggest that you do whatever feels good to you. You might move a little, or maybe you're feeling like pumping yourself up, or maybe you need to stand up for a minute, whatever feels good to you. So we like to remind everyone that you can do this, that you are already a data person. So if this feels very new to you, you likely already have strengths or skills in other areas, and a lot of those skills are actually very common to using things like Excel. Remember to be patient with yourself, and our entire team Googles things all the time, including Excel related. So you're not alone. Please feel welcome to Google. We do it too. All right, I'm going to pass it off here to Olivia.
This progresses. First, we have some basic features that we would like to highlight with navigating Excel workbooks. Up here in that corner where that little yellow box just appeared is the save icon, and we encourage you to press it often. You can also toggle on the autosave option in the upper left-hand corner near the floppy disk symbol or the save icon. Now, the top bar of Excel has ribbon tabs that have things like home, insert, draw, page layout, formulas, data, etc. And these tabs display various groups within Excel. This image is showing us what the Home tab looks like, which has things that you commonly see across other Microsoft Office products like Word and PowerPoint in terms of having things like clipboard and font and alignment. There are also some groups that are unique to Excel, such as number and styles, cells. And you can, another thing to note is that you can pin this bar here. So there's this little caret that's shown there. So if you click on that, it will make this go away and disappear, which creates more space for looking at cells or the formula bar. And then to bring it back, there will be a little thumbtack that you could click on to make it stick. And we'll show that to you later when we get to the demonstration part, but just didn't quite have enough room on the screen to show that here as well. And then the other thing to note is a help button, which is up there. And that's a good thing to go to if you're trying to figure out how to do something in Excel. Next, we wanted to highlight a little bit about how to change the language settings within Excel. We've had some requests for demonstrating this in the past. And while we would like to be able to show it to you in real time, in order for the changes to stick, you have to basically close out of Microsoft Office products and reset it, and then it stays. So we're just showing you how to get there and what it will look like eventually, but you'll go to the options menu and then select language and select the preferred language that you want for the buttons and for sort of the auto correcting proofing languages. Click OK, and then it will take effect. And so once it has been saved, if we had restarted Microsoft Office, you'll see now in this image here what Excel would look like if it was set to be working in Spanish. Next thing we'll get into is navigating some workbook tools. One of the customizable features in Excel is that you can adjust what ribbons show up when you use Excel. You can add or change which ribbons show up across the top by going to File and then selecting the Customize Ribbon button, and it will bring up these options and you can change which ones are selected. A little behind on getting my animations up, so apologies for that. So this is an example of where maybe developer was not selected, well, even though it is selected here. And then in order to make those stick, you click OK, and then you will see it pop up in this ribbon. So next, we'd like to get into some of the building blocks of the Excel program. So tabs at the bottom of the program show you the worksheets that are in your workbook. In this example here, you can see that we have two worksheets. We have sheet 1 and we have Case Manager 1 data. And if you wanted to add another worksheet to this workbook, you could click on this plus symbol here. You can also add worksheets by right-clicking on a tab and selecting copy. You'll note here that we have some guidance as to how to label a worksheet. There are some restrictions or limitations within the Excel program, so it cannot be a blank sheet. It has to have some name, even if it's just a letter or a word or a number. It can't be more than 31 characters, and it can't contain any of these special characters that are shown here. And a few other things to note in terms of what you can accomplish with right-clicking on a tab. I mentioned earlier that you could copy a sheet. You could also use that to move a sheet from one place in your workbook to another. So maybe you want Case Manager 1 data to be the first worksheet. You can also change the color of a tab, and you can hide worksheets as well. And this is showing you the various actions that you can take by right-clicking. Next, we're going to get into the building blocks of Excel. And we're going to start at the most basic level, cell. So in this example, we have cell B4 shown because it is at the intersection of column B and row 4. You'll notice that there's this green box around that cell and that there's a little bit of like a darker gray for the B column and row 4. And also in this part of the Excel program, it's telling you what cell that you are in. You can also look there. Another key building block within Excel are columns. And here we have column B highlighted. You'll see that it's there. So those are the numbers within Excel, row 4 shown here. And sometimes you might want to, select the entire worksheet, which you can do by clicking on this caret that's sort of at the intersection of A and 1. It's this little triangle-like feature there, and that will end up selecting the entire page. Apologies for the quick scroll through. I'll keep us going into some of the formatting pieces where we'll be covering things like cell formatting of dates, data validation, format painter, how to freeze columns and rows, and a few key formulas. So we'll start by reviewing some of the common cell formatting tips, and there are several places where you can format a date. And one of the reasons why you might want to do this is to have some consistent format of those dates for analysis. You can also adjust how they appear through the Home tab. And that will provide you with some options for more number formats. Data validation is also a common tool that we use to create formatting within a cell, and it can be used to create formatting for an entire column or row by applying the formatting that you create to a selected set. So to get there, you would go to the Data tab and then select Data validation, and that option will open up this dialog box where you can make the adjustments. Excuse me, keep up with my animations. And another thing that we wanted to highlight is Format Painter, which looks like the paintbrush. You access that on the Home tab, and you can quickly apply formatting that you have in one cell to another cell by double clicking on Format Painter, which will make a paintbrush icon appear. And then any cells that you select with that paintbrush, that formatting will be applied. And to deactivate it, then you would go back to the Format Painter icon in the Home tab and click it once. And these are all things that we're going to be walking through in a moment, sort of laying the groundwork for it. The next piece that we want to highlight is freeze panes. You can do this to freeze columns or rows. It can be helpful to keep a piece of data constant while you're maybe scrolling across or down. In particular, you might be entering records for a client. You want to make sure that as you progress across the columns that you are staying with that same client. So freezing how Excel appears can help you just to stay. Cool. Next, we are going to highlight a function called concatenate. And this is used to combine what is in more than one cell into a single cell. We often use this for creating something like a unique ID, which is shown here. And this function is combining the data in rows B, C, and A in that order in order to create a unique ID. Another thing you might want to do is be able to parse out information from a single cell into multiple cells. Like maybe you have a full name that's captured and you want it to be first name and last name instead. So in this example, we have characters from the Disney movie Encanto, and currently their names are just in one column, but we're going to use Excel to parse them out into two. So to get started, you'd select the data that you want to chunk out, and under the Data tab, go and select Text Columns, which will bring up this animation wizard. Most commonly, we parse out information by selecting the delimited option, which essentially allows you to pick your separation character. And so in this case, we don't have any characters that are separating first and last name in that column, but there is a space. And so you would select space in the wizard, and then next you tell it where you want the data to go. And in this example, we're thinking that we want to have the original record for the full name being in one column. So we don't want it to overwrite the data and start by parsing out in column A. Instead, we want it to start by parsing out in column B. So there's up there. And then you click finish, and magically the information you had in column A gets separated out into column C. And another key feature to highlight is the drag, copy, and paste. And this just is a quick way of, again, copying formatting from one cell to another. To activate this feature, you can select the cell to copy and hover over the lower right corner of the cell until a small plus sign appears. And then you click and hold to use that plus sign to copy and paste it into cells below it, or maybe to the right of it, depending on which direction you're moving. And that takes us through kind of the quick run through of information before pivoting to a demonstration of these key features within Excel. So I can stop share for a moment and pause for any questions. Okay, let me get to sharing the workbook. So in this, I've just opened up the blank Excel workbook, and you'll see here that we have some of these ribbons across the top. And there are fewer here that were in the example that I showed in the slides. So we'll go and practice adding something to our ribbons. We go to File, we select Options, Customize Ribbon, and we'll see how there are some that have been unselected here, like Draw, Automate, Developer. Add-ins and Acrobat. I think Developer can be a common one because it's formatting, so we'll check that and say if we want to keep it in our ribbon, and then say OK. And you'll notice now that it's changed up here. We have Developer as a choice. We'll also practice saving our workbook because we don't want to lose our work as we go. I'll just call this like intro. So no, oops, not how you spell it. Oh, it already exists because I practiced. So yes, I want to work list, and now we have it saved. Another piece that we walked through in the slides was how to make this ribbon with information appear and disappear. So here's the carrot, and you'll see as I hover over that, there's a pop-up that says collapse the ribbon. Yes, I want to do that. And now that goes away. So there's less space that's taken up here. Maybe there would be lots of records that we want to be looking at, but I find it helpful to be able to see the different choices for actions that we want to take. So I want to pin it back and click on that thumbtack like icon. So we also talked about sort of the building blocks within Excel, right? So here is an example of being in cell D3. So we see that it's bound by this green box. We see that column D has a little bit of highlight as well as row 3. And in this name field, we see that the name box D3 is there. So that just helps us navigate and where we're going. We only have one sheet currently. That's how Excel works when you open up a new workbook. We might want to add a sheet. So we have now sheet 2. Excel will automatically label it, and if we do another one, sheet 3, and say, oh, well, we didn't really need to add 3 sheets. We want to get rid of this. So we can right click over sheet 3, and then these options come up and we can select delete. And it didn't ask us to confirm our choice there because we hadn't typed in the worksheet at all or made any edits. But if you were to make some edits within this sheet and then delete it, it will ask you, are you sure that you want to do that? Because it can't recover the data. So let's say, yes, we actually have to do that, and we'll click delete. If we were to do that for sheet 1, it won't allow us because the workbook has to have a sheet. For the sake of demonstration, I'll double click within this tab here to give it a name. We'll call it demo and assign it a tab color if we want purple. We can make a copy of it if we right click and select new for copy. And you'll see that you have the choice of making a copy appear before the current sheet, demo sheet, or you can have it moved to the end and then create a copy. And it can stay within this workbook, or you can select a destination for another file that you have open, or maybe even a new workbook if you wanted to, but we'll just keep it within here. And so when we copy it, Excel will automatically add a 2 on the end, just because sheets can't have, or there can't be 2 sheets with the same name within the workbook. So that's why it's there, so that it can really tell the difference. So maybe you have your raw data and then you're copying that so that you can manipulate it and make some edits. That might be a reason for having 2 sheets that have some of the same information. Now we'll work with some fake data in order to show how to do some things with drag, copy, and paste, and concatenate and text to columns. So in this example, we'll have client ID as a variable. We'll have full name and enrollment date. Usually you'd have many more variables than this, but for the sake of demonstration, we'll keep it kind of succinct. So you'll notice that I just made the column label for column A bold. I want to apply that across my other variables. So I'll double click on the format painter, and you'll see that this paintbrush icon is now appearing, and you can drag that across and it will make the other variables bold also. To get rid of it, I will just click once. You may also notice that we're not able to see the full names of these columns. To make them wider, you can double click at the edge and Excel will automatically expand to the width of the characters that you have within that. So I'll create a couple of fake client ID numbers here, and you'll notice that they're just increasing by 1. It's kind of the pattern. And so we can have Excel help us continue to add client IDs following this pattern by selecting 3, or we could even just select 2 and 3. You need to have 2 within the pattern, and you'll see how it's telling us what the new numbers are going to be when that appears. Is this large enough for folks to see?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make it a little bit bigger in case it's helpful. All right, next for some names here, I was thinking about just different characters in preparation for this. So I have a list in a Word document that I'm just going to paste over here. So you'll see those appear, and they're pasted within a single cell. And we can even, with this example, practice doing the text to columns parsing out so that we can have them appear somewhere else. So we'll hit text to columns, and we want to do the limited option, and we want to use a comma to separate them. And you'll see here how it's even giving you a little bit of a preview of how it's going to parse out those different names. And we'll say next and finish. And so now each character has its own column. But we want to pull these characters into our data set. So I'm going to copy these. I'll say Control C. You'll see that that has been selected for what's been copied. We'll paste them here, and you can transpose the data for how it is pasted so that it will paste them in separate rows rather than it's just like a quick way to bring them in. For our enrollment dates, we'll say November 6th, 2024, and then like a week later for next client. And maybe we want to repeat this pattern so that it's like every Wednesday you're enrolling a new person. So if we select both of these, Excel should recognize the pattern of once a week, and we'll see how those dates get populated. But I will undo that and show you what it's like if we only selected this first one. Because then it's just going to add by 1 because it didn't have both dates to know what year. I can also show an example of text to columns using space as a separator. Folks would find that useful. So that would mean that we're going to use this full name column here, and maybe we want to create separate first and last names. This is the data that we want to pull from. So we'll highlight that, and we'll say text to columns. The limited is how we're going to separate it. This time we are going to use a space as our separator. And so it gives you the preview of what that will look like. We'll say next. We want our data to start in D2. So we can use this and select D2 instead over the start finish. I'm not sure why that. I think I might have a hidden space somewhere. Oh, yes, I think all of these have a space in front of them. Yes, so we see that Wilma had a space and Scooby-Doo had a space before it. So it sort of took that space as a row and then it did the other ones. So that's just a way of sort of seeing some characters that are there. So if I were to get rid of the spaces and do this again, it should work. So I will select the information again, do text to columns, limited space, and now we see how they're all lined up in the preview. So the preview should have been a warning to me that it wasn't going to work, but it isn't. And we want it to go starting in 2, 6. And we want to override the data that's there. And now we see that it pulled into the right place. Finally, I will show you all how to do a unique ID. And this will be the concatenate function that we talked about earlier. So maybe we want to do last name, ID, first name to create our unique ID. We want to start with the last name and then go to the ID and then go to the first name and close parentheses, and that should give us that unique combination. And to carry that through to the others, we can double click this and it will follow that formula. And if you click within a cell, you'll see up here what the function is that's producing this result. Finally, I think one of the other things that we talked about was freeze names and how you might want to be able to hold something constant when you're scrolling across or up or down. So you get to that by going to view and then freeze panes. and selecting freeze panes. And so now when we scroll down, we keep our variable names list. And if we go across really far, our ID number will stay in view. There might be other ways in which you want to freeze panes, but that is a common thing. That takes us through the bulk of the demo for the features that we wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to re-demonstrate anything or answer any questions. Absolutely, I'd be happy to. We'll see currently that if you scroll around, the data can disappear. So in this example, we want to be able to hold our variable names in view and hold our client ID. So we go kind of just like on the inside of that, and you'd hit view and then go to freeze panes and select freeze panes. And so now we'll see how there are these lines that appear. So it's telling you like this row or this column is going to stay in view and this row will stay in view. So as we scroll down, we can still see what the variable names are. And then when we go across the client IDs, and you probably noticed that when I clicked there were other options. So we can unfreeze it. You can also just freeze the top row, like that in view, or you can freeze the first column.
Okay, cool.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Cool, great. And since we were talking about filtering and whatnot, I can quickly show that too. So on the data tab, you have the filter option, filter, and you see all these little carrots appear here. So now maybe we want to filter last name A to Z, and we'll see how the data moves around. And also to get back to what we had before, we arranged by client ID smallest to largest, and we see that it's as it was.
So just to confirm, to prevent the data from getting mismatched, you just want to make sure that every column that you have has the filter function on it.
Yes, that is helpful. I would also say like have a raw tab. So like whenever you're cleaning, have the original like raw tab, make a copy of that and like edit in your data clean or give it some kind of name. And that way, if anything seems to be off or goes awry, you can always go back. So at least that's what I do for my own.
Also, we will see you back here in 10.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Pairing and cleaning data. So before we go into some of the specific Excel tools, these are some tips we like to share before you even get started with the cleaning activities. So we always recommend that when you have your data set in Excel, that you do your best to do your data entry with one person or client per row, and that before you start any data cleaning, that you save a copy of that Excel file. That way you have something as backup. That's what Olivia was referring to before the break. We call it a raw data set. That if something happens, like the sorting issue that was brought up before, you have the raw file to either reference back to, or in the event that you can't figure it out, you can just go back and start again. We also suggest, and we do this ourselves, that you write down the different steps you're taking to clean and prepare your data. Particularly if you do this frequently, you can then follow your same process at a future data submission or go back and respond to questions that might come up. It's also helpful for other colleagues to refer to it and be able to replicate the process. And then admittedly, I don't remember the steps that I did month to month or even day to day sometimes. So sometimes the reference is really just for me. So what does it mean to clean the data? So cleaning data typically refers to either fixing or changing or removing data that's either incorrect, it's duplicated, which means the exact same piece of information is in your data set twice, or data that's missing. So examples of incorrect or what we would also call messy data that needs to be cleaned before summarizing or analysis is that data doesn't have the responses that match a certain type of format that you need it to be in. It could be that somebody accidentally entered the same client or maybe even the same service twice, which is the duplication, or did not enter known information, so it's missing. So you might look at your data set and think that data should be there. I know that it does exist, but it's not in the data sheet. And so going back and entering that. Having corrected or clean data will really help you have accuracy in your summaries. It's also easier to read the data and use the data. So this is a helpful step. So when approaching cleaning data, there's a few things that you can look for and a few ways you can approach cleaning. So you're pulling up your data and really reviewing it for those errors. You might be looking for things like empty cells, which would let you know there's missing data, duplication, so maybe one person's demographic data is showing up in your data set twice, letters or symbols in columns that should only have numbers, and you might also be looking for responses in a column that don't match a pre-existing list of what your response options should be. And we'll show some examples of what that looks like. So how to clean these issues, you can use the different functions that Olivia was highlighting earlier. You can sort your data and look at it top to bottom to see if there are any outliers. You can filter to check for spelling variations. You can manually fix your data. That's a very good way to check out what's going on, particularly in a small data set. You can use find and replace to fix a common problem. And you can use conditional formatting to see things easily like duplication. And we'll walk through those in the demonstration. So these are some slides that after the workshop and in the PDF guide, you can come back and reference so that you can remember how to find the button that you need. But some of the basic tools that we started looking at already are turning on that filtering and sorting button. So this is showing you which ribbon in Excel you can find that on and which button it would be. You can also use conditional formatting, which we will walk through. And conditional formatting, once you apply it, can be helpful for either quickly visually seeing something like duplication in your data set, or it can be helpful for filtering or sorting, because once you apply a color, you're able to sort on or filter on color. Another helpful function is the find and replace, which you can use the shortcut Control F, and that will bring up a dialog box where you can then look for what you know is a common error in a certain column and then replace it with the response that you need it to have. And then finally, something you can do is also, so this is something that can be helpful when you have a column that you really need to do some substantial cleaning to. It's helpful to have even just the raw column available to you for reference, and then a new column where the data is cleaned so that you can reference between the two. So recoding describes a process of making changes to the cell values of a column. And commonly recoding includes like looking for things like differences in upper cases or lower cases or missing information or misspellings. You may find that it's helpful to recode to your corrected data or to be able to complete your data analysis or aggregation. So one example tends to be that demographic response options. You might have a different set of demographic response options that you use as an organization. And then your reporting requirements from funders may look different. And so you need to recategorize your data. So how you recode, we recommend making a new column next to the raw column. You can do a few different things. Recoding is more of an idea than an exact one specific process. So we like to suggest sorting your column. It just makes it a little easier to see what's going on in that column. And then depending on the size of your data set, you may end up manually entering the recoded responses and using like a mix of copy and paste. You might use text to column to create additional columns. Olivia was sharing a few things like you can split your list up into multiple columns. You might use a formula to recode your information into the new column. Find and replace is a great option. And then, as I mentioned, copy and paste. All right, so before we move into our next section, I'm gonna pause here and pull up the practice data set again, walk through a few of those things. So here we have the practice data set, and I'm gonna start by just kind of walking through, I'm gonna do my best to verbalize the mental process for approaching cleaning and kind of reuse some of the tools that Olivia demonstrated, like applied to the concept of data cleaning. So the first thing I do is kind of look at what the Excel looks like and try to decide what would make this easier for me to actually visually look at and decide what type of formatting I want to do to be able to see this data set better. So some of the things that I'm seeing are that my first row with my column headers, they're kind of hard to read because they're all squished up. There's the wrap text applied up here, so I can technically see all of the words, but it's hard to read. So I'm actually going to select this full row. I'm going to remove the wrap text, and I think I'm going to expand it because this particular data set is not too large. It only goes here to column Q. So I'm going to start by selecting the whole sheet, which I come up here to this grayed out arrow. I click on it and now it's green. I have my whole data set selected. And then I'm coming over to one of the columns and I'm going to expand that column. And because I have my whole sheet selected, it's expanding my entire sheet. And so now I can read all of my headings. I do have to scroll, but this is my personal preference. The other thing I'm going to do is take a look at adding the filter function. So for that, I'm going to go up to the data ribbon. I'm going to go over to the filter function. I want to apply it to my first row. So I have a heading in my first row selected and I'm going to hit filter. And now I can see a little drop down arrow across my headings. I like to check. So this is something that came up as a question in the prior section. So I do like to check that I see the arrow across all of my headings. If I've already resized, sometimes it's hard to see the arrow over the letters. So I will select the whole sheet again, expand a second time. And so now I find it just easier to scroll across and see that all of my headings have the arrow. All right, so now I can see my data pretty well. I can use the drop downs and I'm going to start looking for like what's sticking out to me. There are several things on here. Some of them are so that we have something for you to practice from the breakout groups. So I'm going to start by looking here at the gender identity column. So within this column, something I'm noticing, well, it's a little hard actually. So the first thing I'm going to actually do is sort this from A to Z. And by doing that now, my different gender categories are grouped together. It's a little easier to see. Typically when I'm doing this myself, I would actually probably have this a little bit more zoomed out because then I can just see more at once. For the purposes of demonstrating, it's hard for you to see as a participant, so I'm going to be more zoomed in. So I start by using that sorting function to be able to kind of quickly see. The other thing that's handy is that if I have a lot of data that goes a lot of rows, it's not very effective to scroll. But if I open up the sort list, I can actually see the filtering options. And that's a quick way to see, especially for data that should have like a specific set of response options. You can pretty quickly see what the issues are in this particular column, which is that we've got two responses here that really should be the same, but there should be a space here. We've definitely got a misspelling here. And then I can tell just by looking visually across the two that we've got uppercase, we've got lowercase. It doesn't show up here for male in this drop-down list, but now I'm kind of suspicious. And so I might go there and see, okay, yeah, there's some issues with the capitalization, which sometimes you can ignore that, and sometimes it's helpful to just make everything uniform. So there's a couple different ways that I could approach this. I like to start by highlighting the column that's next to the column I'm trying to clean, and I insert a new column. One thing that's kind of nice about this is that because I have color up here, I can check pretty quickly that the sorting function was added to this column. Sometimes it might not be. And so that's like one of the first things I check because, as was noted, one of the things that can cause your sorting to get disrupted is if one column doesn't have filter function turned on, then it won't filter. I use the copy plus symbol that Olivia showed to copy over the original heading. And then I usually go up here and I just add on to that this is going to be my clean column. And then, like I said, this personal preference, I like to see all my column headings, so I expand it. And now I can do a couple of different things. I can take a look and decide how I want to actually pull the clean data over. So I could do that by just fully copying and pasting the column over. I could use formulas and I could use find and replace. I'm going to start by copying, pasting this over. And then, for a small data set, it's perfectly fine to just come in and say, okay, there are 2 here, and I'm just going to fix that. And now I can go up to the top and I can see I only have the one response option. The other thing you can do is say, this is the response option I know that I want. And so I'm going to copy and paste that up and down my column. And I can double check that from my raw to my clean column, I definitely had that in the right spot. And then the other option is that you could find and replace. So if you use the Control F, that opens the find replace dialog box. There's 2 tabs. I go over to the replace, and I already did male to female. So let me do a new example, which is I'm looking for lowercase male, and I want that to be uppercase. Let me move my cursor. Uppercase. I usually like to start by finding the next one first, because here's the big challenge with find and replace is it will look for response option that matches what I have in the find, unless I say match the entire cell content. And then I can start over and I can say find next. And now it's going to find me only the ones that have exactly what I put in the find. So I like to do the find first before I hit any replace, so that I make sure that I'm replacing what I really meant to replace. And then I usually start by just replacing one instead of all, because for the same reason, I want to check that what got replaced is what I meant to replace. And then I'll say, okay, that looked good. Only want to apply it to this one column. So I know I want to select only this one column. And now if I hit replace, I don't think you can see the dialog box because my computer, there it is. Okay, so now it says all done. We made 10 replacements, which does sound right to me because if I scroll down, I see, okay, that's what I wanted. The other thing you can do is actually have it also recode from blanks, which can be kind of handy. So if I wanted to make missing data show up as a response instead of just blank, I could still do that. And I can, again, make sure that it's showing me that it's going to do the right thing. For this, I only want it to do it for my actual data set. So I'm going to just select what I want it to find and replace. And I'm going to hit replace. It's showing me it did 1. I'm going to do, and there we go. Okay, all done. We made 3 replacements. I hit okay, I hit close. I've got my unknowns. I've got my male, female. The misspellings have been corrected. I have the space. When I use the drop-down list again, now I can see it. I just have the 4 responses. So that's a little bit about how I might approach some cleaning. Another thing I like to use for cleaning is duplication. And this is something I used for actually the registration of this workshop. So as you all were registering, I had an Excel file of who the attendees are, and I used conditional formatting to check to see if anyone had accidentally registered twice. So to do that, and I'm just going to demonstrate with one column, but typically this is most helpful on like a unique ID column or a full name column or something that's a unique identifier. Actually, here, we can do it on the ID number. So I will select the ID number. This is the column I want to check for duplicates. And I'm going to use conditional formatting. So I'm on the home ribbon. I'm going back to this conditional formatting, and I'm going to use this highlight cell rules. And there's a few different rules you can use. These are all conditional formatting that will apply color to your cells. I specifically want this duplicate duplicate values. And you can select, you can also do a custom format for what you want the cell to do if it identifies duplication. I'm going to stick with the light red because then it kind of stands out a little bit better, and I'm going to hit OK. And as I scroll down, now I can see pretty easily that I've got two of the same ID number. And this is really handy because now I can see pretty quickly that it looks like this might actually be the same person. And I usually just kind of check to see if it looks like, are they the same person with different information, or is this actually just an incorrect double entry? And this does look like a double entry to me. And so this makes it really easy for me to find it, and I can decide what I want to do with it. There's many things that we could decide to do. So I might end up, if I have my raw data set saved as a different file, and I know I want to use this data set cleaned up in a certain way where there's only one row per person, I might delete it from this specific analysis file. I might hide it if I'm deciding to do something else with the data. It just depends on what I'm trying to do. At some point, you may have applied formatting and then it becomes annoying and you don't want it on anymore. And to get rid of it, you can just go back to conditional formatting and you can say clear rules, and you can do it for selected cells, or you can just go ahead and clear your entire sheet and then it's gone. All right. I'm going to jump real quick to the analysis portion so that we can also get to the breakout groups. So beginning analysis, this is going to be pretty basic. So now you have hopefully a few tools to like clean your data, and you're ready to start looking at what are the trends in your data? What is your data saying? You can use some of the basic analysis tools in Excel. And these are sort of the building blocks. So if you've never done formulas and functions before, this might be a helpful reference slide for you, because when you're like looking for things later, it just gives you the language of what Excel uses for analysis. So formulas in Excel have like a basic structure. There's always an equals sign, and then that tells Excel that you're about to make a formula. Here are some of the really like basic symbols that folks typically use, especially when getting started, for the plus symbol, the minus, division, and multiplication. And then the second thing Excel has is functions. So functions in Excel are the things that tell a formula like what it is you're trying to do. So you don't want to have to do like cell 1 plus cell 2 plus cell 3 plus cell, and on and on and on. You can do a function, and that function for the plus symbol would be the sum function. And then what you can do is create a shorter formula. So you can say equals sum and then do a range of cells. And now that function sum is telling Excel you want to add all those cells up. There's a lot of different things you can explore to kind of help you with building formulas. There's a formula ribbon and a builder that we'll look at in a minute. And then I'm going to just come back. We Google things all the time. So Google's a great tool for looking up to figure out like what's a function that could be helpful for me. There are different ways that you can use your data in a formula or as part of a function. And there's two kind of main ways that you can think about it. So there are numeric and then there's text. And numeric means that your column is entirely numbers. So that goes back to your data cleaning. So if you know that you want to use like sum or division or some kind of math that uses numbers, your entire column needs to be in number format. You can't have any text or symbols. If you do have text, you can still do different functions like adding things up or counting. And for that, what you're using are text formulas and functions. Another thing that could be helpful sometimes if your data is sort of in a series that you want to have like go in a different direction, is that you can use transpose. And I'll demonstrate that one. But basically that means you're taking either a row or a column and then you want to make it the opposite. So you would want, for some reason, you want your row to now be a column, or you want your column to now be a row. And then you can also use formulas to start to set up some simple analysis. So again, numeric formulas just mean that that particular function is only going to work on numbers. And so these are just like some of the common numeric functions that folks will use in a formula so that you have it for reference. If you're trying to get started and you haven't used them before, these are some of the more common ones. And then functions, that would work on your text columns. So these would be like name columns or like that gender column that I was demonstrating earlier. These are some of the different formulas that you could create to work on those text columns. So what you're seeing is that there's text in each of the cells here because they're yes, no. And so the types of formulas that you can use to, like if I wanted to count all my yeses, then I can use these different count if, count a, and that's going to count text instead of numbers. And then after you've set up some of your formulas, then you can go in and start to layer on some of those additional tools like conditional formatting. And one way folks will use that is for something like where they're trying to see percentages that are at a certain level, either like an over or an under, so that they can see how many people are feeling connected. If there's sort of like a goal area, that's a very common use for the conditional formatting. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna just start kind of similar to that last demo by just showing you where you find things. And then we can create maybe a couple of the formulas just to see how that looks. Okay, so navigation, there's a couple different ways that you can, and it's sort of whatever works best for you and the way your brain works, is you can navigate to the formula builder or the formula ribbon. And both of those are perfectly valid ways to create a formula. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and just click a blank cell. And then I am going to start by showing you the formula ribbon tab. So across the top where you see your different ribbons, there's one specifically for formulas. And it's just kind of a whole world of things that you could check out. One of the things that's kind of handy is this function library. When you're creating a formula, the way that Excel knows that you're doing a formula is to do equals. And now Excel knows that this is going to be a formula. And when you are building a really basic formula, you can say equals 10 plus 12 plus 2 plus on and on and on. And when you hit enter, it will do the math. So this is the basic building blocks of what in Excel is called a formula. And if you want to do this for a lot of numbers, it can get difficult. It can also get difficult if you're trying to do that for like all of these numbers in this grade column. So that's why you could use something called a function. And the function library is helpful because it can just be a spot where you can like see what kinds of functions exist. And you hit the little drop down and it'll tell you the little function options. And then it will also kind of tell you when you open it what the function is trying to do. If you're kind of familiar, this might be helpful. Honestly, when I was first learning Excel, I would see what the function is and then I would Google it and let somebody on YouTube like give me the 10-second explanation of what that function is. So that is the like function library. There's also this thing called the formula builder where you say insert a function and then it pops open a dialog box and it gives you a spot where you can start to build your formula, and also we'll try to like emulate this function library, like mimics it here. And so this is another spot. And so it's the exact same process. It's just another way to visually see it. So some people this resonates, some people the function library up in the ribbon resonates. And then for other folks, you can actually just build it right here, the cell line, where you can say equals. And especially for the really common functions, that's where I would say you're starting. You want to add things up. And this is handy because it will tell me what this function is doing as I'm typing it in. So it's telling me that the sum is going to add all the numbers in a range of cells. And so that's just handy to know because that's what I want to do. I want to add up a bunch of numbers. So then I'm going to create a range of cells. And you do that by doing parentheses. So when you use functions, there's always going to be a set of parentheses. And that's how you then contain what the function's going to do. It's also handy to build it up here in the formula builder because it will help kind of just prompt you with what it is that you need to do. You need to start by giving it a number, and hopefully this is big enough that you can see it, but there is a comma here. And so it's telling me I need to separate my numbers by commas so that I get the right thing. So I could put like number, but what I really want to do is add up the numbers in my column of data. So what I could do is actually select the data range, and I will do that by selecting the whole grade column. And so it gets a little messed up down here. That's why I like to look at it up here in the formula builder line of the Excel. And it's showing me this range. So it's telling me that it's going to go from cell E2, and then the colon here says use the whole range all the way through 31. And then I need to close the parentheses because the two parentheses are what tells Excel this is what to use in the function. And then I hit enter. Now it's added up all of the numbers in that column. This is an example of a numeric function. So all of the data that's in this column is a number. I wouldn't be able to use sum on a text column. So I can show that really quickly by selecting maybe everything in this name. And when I hit enter, it comes out with something kind of funky. Like that is not a sum of anything. So if I wanted to do something for text, that's where I need to use the text functions. A really common one would be like for like a field like gender that we did clean. We can go equals, which says I'm making a formula. And I want to use a text function. So I'm going to use count, which says contains numbers. So the counts of numbers of cells in a range that contains numbers. So regular count is a numeric function. So that won't work. So I actually want to come down to this one, count A. This is the one that will work on text. And so that's the one I want here. And then I can select this column of data and close the parentheses. And now it's going to tell me I have 30 cells that contain text information. So it's just a count of like how many cells there are, which this is helpful for creating something like a denominator. And then I can kind of build on this. So I can say, okay, I also want to know how many of a certain response is in this column. So to do that, I want it to be conditional. So if a response is unknown, I want to count the unknowns. And that like if statement that I just ran through in my head is actually the function. So I can say count, and what I wanted was if, and then I'm going to start my parentheses, and I'm going to say, okay, first I need to, the helper is telling me to select my range of data. So I'm going to do the same range where I do the whole column, and then I need to put a comma, and then it will tell me, okay, now do the criteria, which is what is the if statement? If what? So if what I think I'm going to do for this one is the unknowns. And anytime you have text, you can put that in a, wow, I'm totally blanking on that symbol. The quotations. You put them in quotations. If it's text, you put it in a quotation. If it's a number, you just put the number, and then you close your parentheses, and then you hit enter. And now it's telling me there were 4 unknowns, which I can be demonstrating. I did this so that it's easy for you to see. There are 4 unknowns, which if I actually just highlight, I can see that count down here. But now I have that. And then what I can keep, and I will, as we're doing this, show you that I also will tend to do label it. So this is my denominator, the 30. And then this is my unknown count. Okay, now I want to know what's the percentage. How many unknowns do I have in my entire data set right now? So then what I can do is say, I'm going to equals, and you can do a couple things here, but the quick thing you could do is say, this is what goes at the top, and then I want to divide it by what goes in my denominator, which is the total number of responses. And now I get this decimal, and decimals are fine, but it's a little easier to just know the percent. So I'll go back to this home ribbon and I'll say, I'd like it as a percent. And so now I know 13% of my data set has unknown responses. And I might do that for every single response here so that I can know how many people are identifying as male, how many people are identifying as another gender, how many people are identifying as female. And if this was something like the satisfaction column, I might apply the conditional formatting to be able to see either or both a greater than or less than. So if I want to know that I'm greater than a certain percentage, then I can open up conditional formatting for greater than, and it will let me decide. So right now it's defaulting to saying if it's greater than 13%, I could say actually 50. And so then it won't show up as red. All right, I think in this, we have just a few minutes. If you do have questions, please either put them in chat or hang on to them for just a moment, just so that I can make sure that we get through our next step so you know before you have to hop off what's coming next. So there will be a follow-up email. Sometimes it can take a minute to kind of get all of the recordings downloaded, make sure everything is syncing, uploaded, all of that fun stuff. So what we'll do today, we'll send out a message that just has like more resources, make sure that you have the slide deck. We'll send you a PDF of like screenshots. And then when the recording is ready, we'll send another email to make sure that you have the link to the recording as well. In that email, we will also just welcome you to reach out with any additional questions that come up. If you need some like one-on-one support or you have a specific question, we can do our best to try to get those answers. And then this slide will also have, in the PDF version, it's clickable. It just has a few more YouTube resources in case that's helpful for reference. And then lastly, I'm going to hand it back to Carrie to share more about the capacity building.
Hi, thanks so much. Thank you, Cardea, so much for this amazing training. I wanted to just give a quick reminder that if you receive Best Starts for Kids funding, you can actually receive free capacity building through our TA and capacity building program. So there are consultants here on the left that specifically provide data and evaluation capacity building. So you can see it's Cardea, of course, as well as the Capacity Collective, Crux, and Puget Sound Education Services District. And on the right, you can see all the different kinds of support they can provide. So they can help you with designing an evaluation, such as helping developing logic models or research questions. They can help with data collection, like designing surveys or focus group questions, or they can even help you build skills to analyze and report your data. And capacity builders can help partners to build a new or even modify an existing database. So there's really lots of opportunities to partner with data and evaluation capacity builders. If you'd like to partner with one or receive support, or you're just curious about what kind of support is available, you should reach out to my colleague, Stefan Ajamang. He is the Data and Evaluation Capacity Builder Program Manager. And I'll put his email address in the chat. So please feel free to reach out to Stefan if you're interested. And that's it.
If you do have a moment to complete the evaluation, it's super helpful, especially if you plan to come to the next workshop, because we look at that. So if there's something you'd like to note, we'd love to help you. Yeah, and so thank you so much for your time.